I was an affair baby. After years of low contact, my father is sorry for not being there for me enough and wants to reconnect. I, Tina 34F, have found myself in a situation that has me feeling really skeptical. To give a brief backstory, I am an affair baby. This did not leave me with two loving families, this left me with two resentful and emotionally neglectful families. I have been largely ignored my entire life by all of my siblings. I have been mistreated and scorned by my step-parents. The worst though is my two biological parents have also treated me like I am their punishment instead of like a daughter. When I was 18, I left my home in Nebraska for college in Missouri and never returned. It was while I was in college I found out that my stepdad Mark opened 2 credit cards in my name, maxed them out, and then defaulted on them. I sought legal action. He was convicted of identity theft and spent 2 years in prison. That completely ended any contact I have had with the Whitmore side of my family, my bio mother's side. I can happily say none of them have reached out to me since a very awkward confrontation right after his conviction. In the last 13 years I have reached numerous personal goals. I became a plastic surgeon just as I had always dreamed. It does have its noble pursuits as well. Facial reconstructions of crash victims, helping breast cancer survivors, cleft palate repairs. It's not all noses and boobs, just mostly. I'm doing very well for myself. Well, like I said, I have not heard from the Whitmore side in 13 years, but I have only barely heard from the Freeman side in those same 13 years. During the time I was seeking charges against my stepdad for stealing my identity, my stepmom Brianne was really supportive and encouraging of me. She had never been that nice at any point in my life. My dad, Barry, also called me more during that time, and at moments made me think he was genuinely interested in me. I guess those were just wishful thoughts on my end. Shortly after that case was finalized, it was back to radio silence. That was really the final straw for me, and I have not bothered with these people since then. I get the occasional announcement. You know, like weddings or the birth of a child. When I assumed they got word that I was a surgeon, I started getting invitations. Funny how there were never invitations before that, just FYI mail. I guess when they think you have money, you finally become worth an actual invite. In the first few years when I was just getting the announcements, I would usually send a card or something with congrats, but by time I was making serious money I had matured. I realized they never wanted me in the family, and now that I was financially stable, they probably thought I could be of use to them. No thanks. I haven't so much as responded to a card or Facebook message in 3 years. That was until about 6 months ago. I got an email from my father. In it he actually apologized for not being there for me enough when I was growing up. This was beyond an understatement, but it was a start. It was a very long email. He told me all about the comings and goings of him, Brianne, and my 2 older brothers, Larry and Liam. They are both married now and have 4 kids between them. The oldest just turned 18. On top of all this family recap, he talked about the few good memories we have together. Such as my birthdays, which aren't great honestly, or the time he drove an hour to see me play volleyball in Lincoln. I don't know why he would list this, he literally bitched about it the whole way home. I figured this was a one-off incident. Maybe he had a new coworker who has a good relationship with his daughter and that made him feel guilty. Whatever the reason, I wasn't going to pay it much attention and didn't respond. Then a few days later I got another one. Similar to the first one, giving me updates, apologizing, and asking for us to reconnect. I ignored it again. Then another came a few days after, then another. Then one from Brianne apologizing and trying to empathize with why I wouldn't want to talk. She actually said, "We don't deserve forgiveness, but if you can find it in your heart to just let us say our piece in person, it would mean the world to your father, and to me as well." WTF. I have shown all this to my Aunt Dina. She is my dad's sister. I am super close to my aunt and look at her as my mom more so than either of my 2 moms. Dina's daughters are my cousins and best friends, Dagny and Daisy. Dina has kept in better touch with my dad than I have. She does at least still go visit their mother, although it's only like once or twice a year since she is just an absolutely awful woman and I can't imagine how anyone could tolerate her more than once or twice a year. Dina says that my dad seems like the same old guy as ever. She hasn't seen him in about a year, but she said the last time she saw him he was just as self-absorbed and borderline narcissistic as ever. Having read the emails though, she can't believe they were written by the same person. She thinks I should keep them at arm's length for a while if I do choose to consider reconciliation. After 4 months of getting what averaged out to be an email every 10 days or so, I finally responded. I told them in a mass email to my dad, stepmom, and brothers. I was very moved by the emails that I have been receiving, but am still very skeptical. I have had a lot of hurt over the years and am not sure how to proceed. I would like some time to mull this over. I don't know how long that time frame is and would like to think it over without further influence. Well, that was 2 months ago and they have actually respected my wishes, sending only one email back a few hours after mine saying, "Take your time." I have been pretty torn. That was until something happened. Last week at the hospital. I wasn't there when this went down, but my friend and colleague was going to be the lead surgeon on this. He has a patient with advanced kidney failure. She is in desperate need of a transplant. They have gone through the whole process of matching her with her sister. As in did all the tests, measurements, everything. They were set to do the surgery as soon as possible. The sister arrives, and in front of everyone, tells her dying sister that she will not get her kidney and is going to die, and that she only went through all this so she would die knowing that the only person who could save her was the person she had wronged the most. She then told their parents that when they died, she was going to dump their ashes in one of those construction site plastic toilets. Now, I don't know what happened between all of them. In fact, I can't imagine what would ever make someone reach that point on the revenge scale, but goddamn, that's harsh. I don't want to become that woman. Someone who hates somebody so much they would rub in that they're going to die. I have decided to reach out and see if my family and I can have the kind of relationship that I have always wished we had. Update. A few weeks ago, I posted about how my family was trying to reconcile with me after years of barely acknowledging my existence. I reached out to them saying I would like to work through the past and build a nice future together. They sent me some nice emails and we made a plan to meet last week. I took a long weekend. I already don't work on Fridays, so it was just clearing my Monday. Everything seemed fine throughout the visit. I visited with the grandkids, and they all had made me little crafts and things. The oldest granddaughter, Lizzie, played volleyball, so she and I talked about that a bunch. My parents and brothers, and their wives, seemed to be really interested in me, asking all sorts of questions. We went out to eat a few times. It was overall a pretty nice weekend. Yet, I just have this feeling that something is off about the whole thing. I guess the things that are giving me some doubts are the types of questions and conversations we would always wind up having. Basically, we would start talking about just any normal mundane thing. Like my dating life or how my brother has really gotten into axe throwing. Yet that seemed to always devolve into a talk about money. They never quite just came out and asked me what I make or anything, but there were a few times it seemed they were hinting at wanting to know. They also had a bunch of questions about what certain procedures cost, especially boob jobs. Could be nothing, I always get a lot of questions about boob jobs whenever someone finds out what I do, so it's not completely unusual. The other thing was, they kept wanting to go out to eat. Which I was fine with. I don't normally consume that much restaurant food as I know it's not the best for a person's health, but I figured why not, this is kind of like being on a vacation. Well, they all seemed eager to pick up the check that first night, almost like they were treating me. The next night it was a lot of stalling when the check was sitting on the table and I decided to pick it up. No big deal. On the last night, since I was feeling generous as this had been a nice trip overall, I told them I would treat them to a dinner out. This is where I got the initial ick factor that has grown as I think back to my visit. They picked one of the priciest places in Omaha. I thought at first, no big deal, it'll be pricey, but they typically just get meals, maybe one appetizer, no real extras. I was wrong. I knew something was up when we got there and all the adults started ordering glasses of wine and several appetizers. At that point, the bill was already pretty high. The main dishes were what I expected, but then everyone, and I mean everyone, got dessert. It was about the time we were going to leave that my dad suggested to Liam that he get something to go for Lucy, Liam's daughter, who is 5 years old, I might add. She was spending the night with her grandparents, and was not with us. Liam was like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea, you don't mind, do you, Tina?" He must have been asking that rhetorically, because before I could even respond, he placed an order with the waitress. He ordered the surf and turf. Really? A 5-year-old wants a 14-ounce ribeye and 2 lobster tails? The bill was astronomical. I paid it and didn't say anything. I can afford it. Before anyone asks, no one thanked me for the dinner. That dinner has me kind of doubting everything, as well as really thinking about their behavior during the whole trip. Am I looking for reasons to distrust, or am I onto something with this gut feeling? Update. Yep, gut instinct wins again. It was all about what I could do for them. After my trip, my family continued to love bomb me. They sent me several emails about how great my visit was, how good it was to catch up, and that they can't wait to do it again. I wasn't sure if there was going to be an again. My responses were brief and maybe a little cold. Which wasn't intentional, but I was still a little jaded from that dinner. That's when the cat was let out of the bag. Now, I don't know what they told Lizzie, but she reached out to me with a thank you email. Apparently she was under the impression I was gifting her a boob job. I inquired what she was talking about, and she told me that it was her graduation present. This is a thing, not the first time I've heard this, although it's usually a college graduation, not high school graduation. Her parents were wanting to get her some sort of really big gift for graduating high school, and when they asked her, she said she wanted boobs. She has small breasts, that is obvious, but they'll fill out more once high school is over and she's a little less active, which literally happened to me and all my friends when we stopped playing sports. I asked her if this was really what she wanted and she insisted it was. At that point I stopped talking to Lizzie and said I need to talk to her parents and mine about this. I reached out, creating a group chat with Barry, Brianne, Larry, and his wife, Cassie. They did confess that they wanted to get her this gift, but that is what made them realize they needed to patch things up with me. They kept insisting, over-insisting really, that they didn't reach out in hopes of getting a free boob job. I am not really buying this. Anyway, I told them I wasn't really sure how comfortable I was doing such a procedure. This is when they began showing their true colors. It was very subtle at first. They were saying they were going to get the procedure done anyway, but that they had looked me up and my reviews were top-notch, which is true, and that they just felt better if family was doing the procedure. We went back and forth like this for a few days, and I agreed to do it. The next week, I sent them all the paperwork I would need filled out in order to even get her on the schedule. This is when it got less subtle. They came to the page on costs. I guess they were under the impression there would be some sort of family discount, possibly even comp services. The whole thing devolved from there. As I stood my ground and pointed out that they said getting back in touch with me wasn't about getting a free boob job, they began to lay on heavy guilt trips. These did not have the same effect that they had hoped. Sure, this type of stuff worked on me when I was a kid and misguided teen looking for any reason to get these people to like me. I'm 34 years old now. I realized they were the problem a long time ago. I was just about to cut my losses and go back to no contact when my dad sent me a message. It was a total guilt trip, but there was one line that made me so mad. Don't you think you owe it to the family to make this as affordable as possible considering all we did for you? WTF? Did for me? Nothing? That's all any of you ever did for me. You did the minimum to save face in front of all the other suburbanite yuppies you called friends. I didn't respond at first. I let myself calm down. I called up Dagny and we chatted about it. She always has a way of making me feel better. She also has a way of being petty when she gets burned by someone, which made me think of that woman. The one who was so scorned by her family that she took the time to travel across states, go through all the testing to be a donor match, only to tell her sister to essentially fuck off in her greatest time of need. Even though I don't know her story, I began to understand where she was coming from. I told my dad to call me, and said I would help out. He softened, but was still a dick, saying, "I knew you'd come around." Anyway, I told them to pick a weekend. I would go in on an unusual Friday and do the procedure. They could pick any time, because I don't ever work Friday, so the whole day was open. They made a big deal about having to get a hotel for 3 days, and asked if they could stay with me. I told them I only had a 2-bedroom townhouse, so that wouldn't be possible, which was scoffed at. I held my ground though, and made them get a hotel. On the first day they were there, I told them we had to go sign all the releases and permissions to do the procedure. I had also sent them this exact packet of paperwork prior to their arrival. Like the typical self-entitled people that they are, they didn't even bother reading through this packet beforehand, or really paying attention when they were signing away at everything. I insisted that my dad and Larry sign everything. They all thought that was weird since my dad is a grandparent, not her legal guardian, but I said I was doing this as a gift to him for making amends that he should be on as well. They took this at face value. Reality was Lizzie was signing a few things at the same time. Those were the actual permissions, she is 18 after all. Dad and Larry were mostly signing the financial side of things with a few consents, and insurance forms since she was still on his plan. When they got to the financials pages, it was much of the same without them even bothering to read over it. Our hospital financial rep said something like, "This contract isn't our typical, it reflects the negotiations you have discussed with our lead surgeon." They just signed it. I did the procedure the next day. It was routine, no issues. They traveled back to Nebraska the next day. The only person who thanked me was Lizzie. Well, it's been about 4 weeks since then, and I guess they just got the bill. At 12 grand, I'm sure it's quite the shock when you see it all written out. Normally it wouldn't be so high, but I doubled my surgeon fee since we did it on my day off. They were bombarding me with calls and messages about this, stating they thought the whole thing was going to be comped. I sent back just one message: "I have no idea what would make you think that. I only do pro bono work for family." After sending that, I just blocked them. I am done. No family is so much better than 2 shit families. I have my aunt and cousins, and maybe one day I'll get married. Until then though, I am just going to keep living the life I built for myself, by myself, without them.